Ok. Não sei, eu ia fazer talk em inglês. Quem faça em inglês não preciso. English? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Okay, first, no one is going to learn anything from this talk. This is more of a like fuck CSS talk. The actual name of the talk was fuck CSS, but go bring me to reason and made me change the name of the talk. The idea is you're not going to learn anything. There's going to be a lot of GIFs, and there's going to be a lot of profanity. So if you have a problem with profanity or GIFs, I suggest that you leave or close the stream or whatever. Okay. So, CSS hates you. You, specifically. The thing about CSS is that it's one of the easiest things to learn and it's one of the hardest things to master. Because there's always a new bug and there's always a new feature and there's always a new fucking browser to test CSS in. It's horrible. And there are a couple of reasons why CSS is not bad, but it's hard to implement and do properly. CSS is not hard to implement, CSS is hard to do properly, basically. Asshole. So the first problem with CSS is that we have to work for browsers. And browsers do not work the same in every single situation. So, this is a CSS grid layout, and this is can I use. So if you can see, there's a lot of browsers that don't support this. There's a lot of browsers that kind of support this. There's a lot of browsers that actually support this, and you have to actually take all of this into consideration when creating something. And this is one of the horriblest things ever. When I joined TVG, we didn't have auto prefixers, so it turned out all my stuff did not work in Safari, because I was used to like living in 2016, and nothing worked in Safari. Every single one of my tickets came back. Auto prefixer fixes this. Auto prefixer is amazing. I don't know if you guys, does anyone here had to work with Opera Mini? Does everyone know what Opera Mini is? Okay, cool. Okay, I had to work with Opera Mini. So I used to work in a company that did a lot of stuff for like third world countries that had shitty internet. So I had to work with Opera Mini because it's supposed to like, it doesn't really download JavaScript and a lot of stuff doesn't work, so it's way faster and it doesn't waste as much bandwidth as normal stuff. The thing is, Opera Mini is the death of a developer. Opera Mini is horrible. It's the worst browser that I've ever seen in my life. And most of the stuff doesn't work in Opera Mini. And wait, there we go. Most of the stuff like in CSS doesn't work in Opera Mini, as you can see. So that is Chrome, that is Opera Mini. And this is the long slide of stuff that doesn't work in Opera Mini. This is 20 seconds long. And this is just random. That's the thing. There's no like, okay, they're 4 years behind. No. They support Flexbox, but they don't support border radius. Or box shadow. Or it's random. It's completely random. They don't support font faces. You can actually use like Google font faces in Opera Mini. You can't use JavaScript in Opera Mini. Anything that, you can only run JavaScript on page loader, because they cache the JavaScript, so it doesn't go back and forth. So it only does one thing. So you don't have CSS and you don't have JavaScript. It's the fucking death of a developer. If you ever have to work for Opera Mini, slit your wrists. I told you there was going to be a lot of gifts. CSS is random. There's a lot of stuff that is random. Z-index. You can tell me the max Z-index, except you, Coach. You already saw this. Does anybody know what the max Z-index of an NEL? No! You would think that, but no! It's a fucking random number! And I think the most amazing thing about this is that Firefox, if you put it above the max, it disappears. And then they fixed it by putting it back to 0. And then they were like, wait, this shit doesn't make any sense. So they did the correct thing. Even Internet Explorer, it was actually better than Firefox. But I think it's really funny that when you go over it, it just fucking disappears. And as you can see, it's different by browser. And this is an actual issue. So Firefox used to have a thing where you could see the web page in 3D, which was awesome. It was the only good thing that they had in their developer tools, and then they took it away, and I don't know why. But that was the only thing where you can like debug Z-index. There's no way you gotta debug Z-index. You just gotta click buttons, or shift and button. It goes by 10. It's the only thing you can do. Like what? Okay, so this is like the most known thing about CSS. So you have a wrapper, 2 divs inside it, and you have a background, and you put float left. Ignore this. Google Drive does this, I don't know why. And you have float left. The thing is that, Jesus man, how many out corners do you have? It collapses on itself because you have 2 floats and it doesn't have a height anymore. But Overflow Auto fixes it. I think this is one of the oldest stuff in CSS, but it's still one of the weirdest fucking shit I've seen. Because this doesn't make any sense. Like, if it would be like clear fix or something, that would make sense, but why does overflow auto fix floats? And you're just so used to like writing it, you're like, oh yeah, overflow auto, that's the issue, forgot about this, but why? What the fuck? Why are you doing this? Doesn't make any sense, what? Yeah, basically. Like, fuck this thing in particular, it doesn't make any sense. Specificity is one of the issues that I struggle with the most, and I think everyone struggles with. Specificity and naming. So basically like naming a class or naming an ID or whatever. Does anybody ever come to this issue? Like, you install a plugin for JavaScript, or this used to happen a lot to me in WordPress. Like, you install a plugin, and it gives you inline styling with important tags. And you can't fucking override it. And you gotta stay with that fucking huge background, and fuck this thing in particular. I can't override it. It's just, yeah, there's nothing I can do. So, basically, in CSS, the specificity thing goes like this. An element or a pseudo element, like before, is worth 1. It's not actually worth 1. Koto told me that you need 255 elements to override an ID. So for simplicity's sake, we'll just use 1 or 0.2 if you want. 10 points is a class, 100 points is an ID, and 1,000 points is an inline style. I don't know who the fuck made this, but I don't know who thought this was a good idea. So basically, to override an ID, you need 11 classes. So this is the reason people tell you not to put IDs. Importance just overrides all this stuff. This is the reason people tell you shouldn't put IDs in your code, because you need 256 elements to override a fucking ID. It's terrible. Let's talk about preprocessors. So SES and last. That was the wrong order. Less and SAS, amazing. You have variables now. That's amazing, right? Yeah. And nesting, look, you have to write CSS like this, which, like this is not so bad, but when you have like 4 pages, it turns into a huge mess because you can't even import it. So those weird things start coming up online where you can concatenate your CSS and CLIs and stuff. This was before Grunt. I don't think I was programming back then, but it doesn't matter. And then it turned into this. This is nicer. This is better, huh? Much nicer. But the thing is, we as humans tend to fuck everything up. Like, we're given a pretty thing and we fuck it up and we make it into this. This is like the if statement pyramid, but in CSS. This happened. This is a problem. People didn't like this. What? No shit. Also, preprocessors didn't solve the specificity and class issues because since you were importing in different places, you never remember that you named the same variable like 4 pages behind. And it's like that joke when two CSS profs walk into a bar and a stool falls in a completely different bar. And you just broke everything. It didn't fix it. So it didn't fix any of the issues. It just gave you pretty things. And the thing about variables is it's really nice when you have your color set up. You never have your fucking color set up. That's not a thing unless you work in a big project. Otherwise, you just have like a GitHub issue that says use variables. Okay, this one is specifically a fucking less, because Jesus fucking Christ, it's just dumb. So less is a calc function. Wait, CSS is a calc, wait, it gets worse, wait. So this is a less. So if you put like 100 pixels minus 20 pixels, it works. Why? Because it's a fucking Google calculator. But if you put 100 pixels minus 20 pixels, it gives you 80%, and you want to slit your wrists. And in CSS, both of them work, because this is a calc function that has been going on since CSS 2. So you have to do that, which is nice, just so beautiful. I love it. And why? I don't know. There's an option to turn this off. To turn this off is strict math, but this option breaks all the shit that you wrote like that. So you can actually turn it off because it breaks all your legacy code and you have to go around and changing everything. So basically we end up with 2 things. One is strict math on and one is strict math off. Why is off not the default? Why is on not the default? Nobody wants to like go and get 100 pixels minus 20 pixels. No, that's fucking dumb. You go to Google. Jesus. Fucking seriously. So then BAM came along. Does everyone know what BAM is? BAM is a naming module, is a naming thingy for CSS classes and stuff. So the idea is that there's blocks, elements, and modifiers. So basically we have an article, and then the element inside of it, that's the text or the image or whatever. So it goes inside like this. And then you have a large, that's a modifier. So basically you have usable components that are not cascading. So there's not a problem with naming the same name, because you have to give different names, and you have a naming convention, and you have to stick to that naming convention. And everything is a class, so you don't fuck up and use IDs. But the thing is, we humans tend to fuck everything up again. So that turned into this. And guess what? People didn't like this. People people were kind of pissed. They didn't appreciate having classes like this. And eventually, we grew out of it and looked at CSS modules. Everyone know what CSS modules is? Okay, so imagine using React. So we import your styles, import style from style.css, and then you use style.section title. I have to be on that side for the thing. Sorry. And you use class name style.section section title. And then the section title, you can just rename it in your CSS. And the cool thing is you can use the, I don't know the name of the option, capitalize or something. Camel case option, and you can use section title like this or with dashes, which is cool because everyone who likes CSS fucking hates this. This is JavaScript, don't fucking like. And the cool thing about this is this gives you an hash, so your class names are never actually the same. This gives you a random hash for every time you use it. And does anybody have any questions about CSS modules? It's mainly used with React. Do you have a question, Caesar? No? Okay, you cool? Okay, cool. So the idea is that doing it this way is going to create you like random CSS names, random CSS classes names, so you don't have to always keep thinking about new CSS names, and it's not going to override your old styles. So this is a pretty standard section title, and this is pretty cool, huh? So you get all your thingies. So you have a React component, you import your styles, and that's only for that React component, React or whatever you're using. This works with anything, I think, as long as you're using Webpack. This is pretty cool. So you don't get the same class names, everything is separated. This is like the best you can get. So you solved all the other problems. Again, we as humans are never fucking happy. Because the thing is, if you're using CSS modules and you want to change a class, so basically you have the title, and the title gets the children, that is basically what you type inside, and it gets a prop called active. And in active you want to change the class, so you have to do this little piece of magic code that goes style.active, toggle, is it true or false? Depends on the prop called active. Does this make any sense? Okay, so basically you have to go and import the class names module because React can handle several class names, don't know. And you say style.section title is always true, and style.active, it depends on active, so it's either true or false. And then you have to do this. We humans are never happy, and people that fucking like this. They were like, no, I want to do CSS in JavaScript, because I don't know, I want to do CSS in JavaScript, because there's only one language in the world, and everything that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. So then we end up with a lot of bullshit, and in the end we end up with style components. I think they're the best approach to CSS in JavaScript. So, you have this. You have import React from React, import style from style components, and you have import section title from style.js. Everyone like that? I'm saying that? Style.js. It's just, that's bullshit.
I like it, actually.
You can remove the JS, actually, so you can just say style. Import style from style. It's just cool. And so you go over there and say const title just returns the section title. The section title is actually defined in the style.js. So, const section title, this looks prettier to them, I don't know why. So const section title is equal to a style h3. That means that that h3 is the tag that it actually creates. So the actual tag is an h3, but it exports it as a section title, so that means you can actually use, can create any name. You can just say fuck this and just use fuck this in your code. You can do whatever you want. No, I'm not the judge here. So you set your styles the same way, and then in there, you receive the props. That's a function that receives the props and checks if they're CSS and if the props are active. And if it does that, it sets color to gray. So basically, it stops you from doing two functions, because people didn't like doing two functions, because that was a lot of functions. And I think the main cool thing about this is the fact that you can actually write the name of the component the way you like, and it actually renders as an HTML element, so that's pretty cool. And that's my talk. That was what I had to say. Does anybody have any questions? Where is YouTube? Does anybody have any questions?
No, not stop.
Okay.
We have questions. So I have two questions. The first one is style components have a lot of performance issues in the big applications. Do you recommend to use it right now, or?
Style components has actually been fixed with a lot of those problems. They also have like above the fold CSS now, They can detect in critical CSS and above default CSS. I think the main use for styled components, I think it's way cooler if you're creating a UI and you're creating a component-based library, a library for your components. I think it's pretty cool to use styled components. I don't know how much it works in a huge page, but I think it's a cool alternative, and they fixed a lot of their problems that they had with the loading. So now you have server-side rendering CSS.
Also, you won't have the problem that having CSS is not used at the page because style only provide you are using it.
Oh yes, CSS modules does that too, and you can still write CSS.
Yeah. And the syntax and stuff, the editors already have.
The syntax for this, wait, there we go.
Because we are used to write.
This is pure JavaScript. If you notice that they have these sticks that basically are for you to initialize the variables inside of it, they just look, I don't know. But
I don't know, but when you are writing MTalk or margin to bottom or stuff, it completes it or.
Oh, I don't think so. So you have to. I don't know what do you use.
We're sorry.
Right? Probably not.
Yeah.
If you use add-on, there's like a plugin for everything.
I already
There's a plugin for everything. So wasn't in add-on we found a plugin that does the typewriting noise. Like you type it and it does typewriting noise. Okay. And you combine it with a mechanical keyboard. It sounds cool.
I'm asking this because we are at Nodes. We are building components with shareable components through the projects. It's very similar what you are doing at TVG, but we have some theming problems because we have to decide if we are using SAS with the first approach that you are presenting, the CSS models with you are importing SAS and we are using this approach, or if you will use style components, because developers, at least at Nodes, have some afraid of writing JavaScript, CSS in JavaScript. And I don't know if this.
My advice was first of all, don't use SAS because you're probably going to run into the same problems that we ran and when we were using less. So you can install post CSS and just put there's a SAS syntax there and run it through post CSS because you're going to run into a lot less issues because CSS modules doesn't work properly if you do it with another preprocessor. You end up losing a lot of the nesting. But between these two things, it depends on what I think this makes sense for something that you want to get server-side rendered. And this makes sense if you have a lot of different props. So if you want to change it a lot, like doing this can actually be tiring. Like we have something that has like 7 of these, and it's not pretty.
We use another tool called React by Melker that it's a little prettier than the class names, but and about the theming on style components, you can create themes and stuff. It's an easy process, or
usually yes. Another cool thing you have about style components is exactly the theming. So if you decide what theme it is at the top, you can just import like the variables from that theme, basically.
Okay.
So you can use normal variables in here, and you just import the variables from that specific theme. Yeah. If you have a lot of themes, I think this is the best approach to go, and it's super overwritable. So most of stuff that you use to create style guides and stuff already uses style components or something in JS. Because of that, it's way more easy to overwrite because you have a theme.js and people just overwrite that, and it gets easier by the second. So instead of doing that thing, you just change it according to the theme that you're using, and just pass it all the longest props.
I have, it's not exactly a question, just my comment on this. I just think this was all made up in the last year or so to just, these are our workarounds to avoid the problem that people cannot write CSS the right way. If people could write a CSS the right way, it will be always better to write it the old way, just include the style sheet tag on my HTML. And I have the theme for my site, and I can use all the classes I want. The helper classes, like adding classes plus classes to build my components without needing to style my components individually, because that will create much repeated code between my components.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that are very similar from component to component inside the website, because the website is a context for components, and they all have the same borders or the same background color or the same this or that or top call or for the family or so. And if you are stylizing components one by one, we are just repeating some of the rules that may come from more general rules. This is all made up from people that realize that couldn't write CSS the right way. They ended up with much repeated class names. They ended up with classes overriding classes with rules. So that's my
You are right, but you have to think about that. If you are working alone, it's easier to maintain that type of approach.
That should be a problem, working alone or in group. The group should be trained.
Thierry,
and
this is the
that would be the perfect scenario. I know it's complicated, but we are just trying to avoid confronting the main issue. People need to work together on CSS and not only on JavaScript, because we see a lot of group working on JavaScript, on components, and on modularizing things on JavaScript, but nothing on CSS. And people need to focus the same amount of time on CSS as on JavaScript.
He does have a point.
That's the main issue.
All
of these will be like, none of these will come up if the main issue will be tackled.
The thing, the problem with repeating CSS, we actually kind of fixed. The thing about like doing the same CSS over and over again, I think we fixed it mainly by using more general components. I use a lot of props and change it by the props. Don't know if that's a lot more work or not, but it fixed a lot of like the general CSS. So we have some general CSS, and then a component is way bigger than it should be, mainly because we have style props. That's mainly it. It ends up being a problem too.
You know, the perfect CSS for me is like
no CSS.
No, it's CSS. No CSS. It's like Bootstrap framework. If you analyze it very deeply, you can see that's perfect. You can do almost anything in the internet with Bootstrap only.
No, you have done everything on the internet.
Yeah, because they built it in a way that you can have classes. You can build components with a bunch of class names that complement each other, and you end up with something that you don't need to write another one on CSS for that. All comes up from Bootstrap, and that's the perfect CSS for me. Is something that you include in your website. It's loaded from the server. It comes right at you. You download the file, it's cached, and every class name on every element on the HTML will use CSS from there and nothing more.
Yes or no? Because you have customizations that.
Yeah, customizations need. I know that's problem of it's you need like a perfect team up with a design team, not to have that kind of things that you need to do individually, you know? Yeah. I don't know if I
no, that makes sense. Basically, you want to create your own Bootstrap. I think we kind of did that, but we used CSS modules.
Remember when we first started on TVG, thinking on building a UI library?
We have that.
Yeah, we have that, but with style components, right?
No, it's CSS modules.
CSS modules.
It's in React, because the point of the library is to import the actual component itself. So like the input element, so it makes sense to just do the CSS, and then people actually have to do manually the HTML. So that imports automatically the HTML and the CSS and the JavaScript. Because we're all using React.
Sure. You need to make available components from one project to another, so you need to.
We're making some of them open source. Notification. We just need like 2 more tests, and you can go open source. The input needs love, and then it can also go open source. It fucking works, folks. Stop judging it. It works. It works. It uses the validation API from the browser, and it fucking works. Kind of.
No, that's not what I said. I think you see this method. Okay. I don't think it's a solution for people who doesn't know what CSS.
Oh no, they're gonna fuck up.
People they actually know what CSS.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the people who use it, who start using that, it's because they work in teams that wouldn't work on normal CSS before.
I think the point is the changing paradigm. We used to do HTML and then JavaScript and then CSS as 3 separate things.
They are two separate things. That's the
But
thing.
we no longer do that. We now write components, and the component is a self-sustained functionality, and the HTML is no longer relevant, the CSS is no longer relevant. The component.
In terms of JavaScript, it's a it's a very isolated thing. In terms of CSS, your component needs to be inserted in
You can have global
website
CSS,
anyway.
man. You can
And the component can be anything, right? A component is almost anything. We talk about components like this.
I import the component. I want to import a component.
But you import a component into a website, into some context, into some visual context, right?
Sorry.
You import that component to be used on a website. And that website has a visual guideline, right? A visual line. You see clearly some colors that are used. I don't think that colors need to be specified on the component itself. It may come from the parent. It may come from the. It
Yeah,
needs to
but
come.
And you can come.
But you get that.
You lost some of it in.
No, you
in
did
that-
lose some. You did lose some of
You
it.
do lose a lot of that ideology when you start doing custom components. That's my opinion.
I think
I'm
thinking
way
about
more-
theming because of that. Because you have to put. It's like you have to have a base style, and you can put themes in top of it, and you can change the brand of your. I think it's brand or style guide of
Yeah,
your
the
website.
style of the colors,
Yeah.
basically.
The colors basically, and you can insert them, and I think it should be dynamic.
Also, having a tight scope for our CSS enables us to import things with more confidence. Like, if I have my app running with scoped CSS, when I import some new code or some new component or some third-party thing,
It's not going to break the outside world, yeah.
yeah, and I'll be confident that that will work and will not mess up my work.
Yeah. I think the main thing about CSS components and this is that you need to try really fucking hard to fuck up everyone else's CSS. While in normal CSS, you don't really need to try that hard. Like, if you're really good at,
you don't even have to try.
you don't even have to try. It's like you touch something and it's broken. I think if you're really good at CSS, you can still do it your way, and you won't need to actually use one of these approaches if you don't like them. But if you work in a big team, there's gonna always be people that don't really appreciate CSS that much, and so you wanna like reduce the scope of fuck up.
That's it. We are working around something. That's the core issue there is that we work always in big teams. There are people that like more CSS and know more CSS than the others, and eventually people that don't like CSS or don't work that much on CSS will eventually screw up the work that has been done before.
I think the thing is, I think you should work on every project like it's open source and everyone's gonna touch it.
See, I read an article from on Medium for BBC Sports. They have an incredible design team that works together with the development team just the best way possible. They said on the article that for every new page they need to build, for every new component they need to build for the website, there's 90% of CSS they don't need to write. They just write like a couple of lines because the other thing comes from a global CSS, from the website context. That because why is it possible? Because the design team works on the same table as the front-end developer team. And they know.
It's a matter of having a design system and implementing a leading design system that goes along with the front-end devs and the front-end devs work. So I get that, and big teams, big and good teams have that running, the design system running, and that's possible.
That's hard to make because I think it's a
It's not hard. Okay? It's just doing things differently.
Yeah.
If other day on Slack I wrote something like the way to solve CSS is having designers doing it. I truly believe it.
Yeah, I truly believe it.
If engineers don't like doing CSS, there's an opportunity for us. So, and once I heard code to say something like the prettier CSS I already saw was written by a designer, and I really it's not hard to believe that.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I will do a better job than you guys. I'm just saying. If you don't want to write it,
Actually, in TVG, why we trap, George actually contributes a lot, and then if he sees something that it's horrible, and he goes there and changes it. So, since everything, I think designers should probably work with front ends to design and develop the components, and then just the components will have a general CSS, like he said. There's just the CSS of the page and gets most of the things from the top, and you just add like backgrounds and stuff. So you should always have like, imagine that you're using buttons. You should always have a default button style. There should always have a general button style that overrides the CSS of the browser, so it gives you a plain button. That it works. And then you create a component that's like primary button, or a button with a type primary. That should only have the background and the things that it actually needs. I kind of agree with him, but not to the extreme. I think we should have a good like correlation of both. Like if you don't put anything, you just put a button in there, it should work, and it should look fine. But if you want to add more shit to it, you can just go in there and like add type primary, and you're going to give you the color of primary, for example. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's the idea of what PVC does. So you have a lot of general CSS, which makes sense. The problem with general CSS is like in TPG's plot.
It's locked in 90%.
90% of the websites, yeah.
You already seeing some big companies trying to glue the designer with the front end. Like you have now tools like React SketchUp with my Airbnb or React Studio that the designers can draw the components, and I think it's in a better place, and they are.
They actually write the components in React, and that generates a sketch file.
And people are trying to do that and to try to give more power to designers, and designers can also be more active on the front end.
I think that's mainly also because the mentality has changed, not only in designers but in developers. Like most developers used to hate CSS. Some of them still do, right? But we're getting a sense that somebody needs to do it, and it's not pretty, so somebody needs to do this. So we try to make better access for designers, whether that be creating a UI, whether that be using some tool that they can actually manipulate. But if we can't do something and they can, it's not fair to just say, no, you can't fucking touch this, you're not a developer. So we lost that, and designers gain a lot more sense that they also need to know a little, at least CSS and HTML to be actually put their things into life. Both sides actually grew up a lot in the last like 3 years. Realize that you can't do everything alone. Is that everything? Cool.